Hello, in this video I'm going to go over the um, histology of the skin in much more detail. I've already done a video on skin histology, but I thought a more detailed video with the cells and exploration of the features would also help. I'm not going to go over the diseases in this session, but we're going to look at the cell types. We're going to look at the general structure. We're going to look at some of the distinct features, and again layers in detail, and the glands present in the skin. And this section is just disorders, but we're going to go over that later. So let's begin by looking at the layers of the skin. So the skin itself, as we've discussed before, is made up of epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. So 3 layers. And then below that, there is tendon. And this is the tendon, which connects to musculature below. So let's go over the epidermis first, which is the first layer of the skin. The epidermis itself is made up of several layers. It begins by stratum basale, or basal layer cells. So here's stratum basale, stratum spinosum, which is the majority, stratum granulosum, and finally stratum corneum. Now, beginning by stratum basale, these are stem cells which show asymmetric mitosis or asymmetric differentiation, which means that one cell goes on to differentiate and become a part of the spinous layer here. So it becomes a keratinocyte. A keratinocyte. And it would have another cell becoming another stem cell, so you don't deplete yourself of stem cells. But the next layer is the spinous layer, which is the majority of the layer. And why it's called spinous is because these all the skin cells are connected with these what we call desmosomes or hemidesmosomes. And when they're preparing these slides for histology, these cells shrink, and these sort of spines that connect cells become more apparent, giving it a spinous appearance. And as we said, this is the majority of the cells that exist in the skin. Now the next layer, which is stratum granulosum, is characterized by presence of granules in that layer. And that is because eventually when the cells die off and become a cornified layer or stratum corneum, they need to lose their material, and their nucleus eventually disappears. So what happens then is that the body doesn't want to lose all these precious material, and so these cells that eventually die off give these nutrients or granules to the cell below. And the cells below, which are these granular cells, hold those nutrients for dying cells so they can be used again. And finally, the cornified layer is dead cells, anucleated dead cells, which are good for firstly holding moisture and obviously protection. So those were the layers of the epidermis, which are really important. Now looking at the dermis, so that was the epidermis that we did. Looking at the dermis then, dermis is mostly comprised of connective tissue, and dermis itself is comprised of two parts. You got the papillary dermis and the reticular dermis. Papillary dermis is closer, as you can see here written, closer to the epidermis. So it's immediately below the epidermis, and it is made up of loose, irregular connective tissue. Whereas the reticular dermis, I think you can see here, are much more denser and bigger collagen fibers. So you see finer collagen fibers here, immediately below the epidermis, and then more defined or bigger fibers below the papillary dermis, which is the reticular dermis. Apart from collagen and connective tissue, there's several other things that are present in the dermis, such as the hair follicle here, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, and erector pili muscle, which is this one here. So what I would like to add at this point is that these appendages, or for instance the sweat glands, begin in the epidermis and then travel down to the dermis eventually. And you can look over these in your own time, but I would like to go over some of the features now of the dermis. So dermis is connected to the epidermis by dermal papilla, and I think these are dermal papilla, as you can see here. They increase the surface area for connection between the epidermis and the dermis. And so if you think about the epidermis here at the top and the dermis at the bottom, so this is the dermis and this is the epidermis. These are dermal papilla, and they increase the surface area for connection of the above epidermis to the dermis below. And I think these are the features that give you distinct fingerprints. Apart from that, we already discussed desmosomes, which hold cells together. So let's go over the layers now in writing again. Let's discuss the epidermis now. So epidermis, stratum basale, has stem cells, and also melanocytes are present there. But we're going to go over that in a moment. And if you have more abrasion of that layer, you're going to have more differentiation. But the next layer, which was stratum spinosum, is the majority of the epidermis, and has these desmosomes that hold keratinocytes together, as we said. And stratum granulosum is characterized by these granules, which contains these molecules here. You don't need to know these, but they were in a quiz in TOB. So the epidermis then, again, is mostly comprised of connective tissue, elastic fibers, in sort of a basket weave pattern. But apart from those, you also have these lamellar corpuscles, which are mostly for tactile and sensitivity to vibration and touch. These are listed here. And I've mentioned that there is loose irregular and dense irregular connective tissue. So this would be in reticular dermis, and this would be in papillary dermis. So that's that. But let's look at the cells that are present in each of these layers. There are mainly 4 types of cells that are present. You've got Langerhans cells, which are immune cells, antigen presenting cells, keratinocytes, which are just your regular skin cells or epidermal cells, as we talked about, Merkel cells, which are touch receptors, and melanocytes, as you all know, give the skin its color. And so beginning by Langerhans cells, these are found in the spinous layer, so the second layer from stratum basale. And as we said, the function is antigen presentation. You can stain them with monoclonal antibodies. The next one is keratinocytes, as we already said. Now, Merkel cells are also present, touch receptors. They're in the basal layer. And you can have Merkel cell carcinomas. They're quite rare, but they're very aggressive. Melanocytes can also give rise to cancers, as you all know, melanoma. And they're of neural crest origin. And that is, when you study embryology, you will see that certain cells, such as cells of the nervous system, come from this neural crest origin. And these are also found in the basal layer. So Merkel cells, melanocytes, are found in the basal layer, and Langerhans cells are found in the spinous layer. So those were the structures and the cells present in each of those layers. Now let's look at the glands. Some people confuse these, the glands present in the skin. So you have 2 types of glands mostly, sweat glands and sebaceous glands. And there are 2 types of sweat glands. And there are 2 types of sweat glands. There is apocrine sweat glands and then ecrine sweat glands. Ecrine sweat glands are found everywhere, and they produce clear, just watery sweat. But these apocrine sweat glands are found in the axilla and genital regions, and they produce these protein-rich secretions, which then the bacteria digest, and it gives body odor. Now the next one, as we talked about, was sebaceous gland, and these are called sebocytes. And blockages of these sebaceous gland can give rise to acne. And they're actually, the method of secretion is holocrine secretion. And let's look at the sebaceous gland again. This is a sebaceous gland here, and you can see it also here, or zoomed out. I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. We will go over the disorders in talks, and also I can do some other videos on them if you'd like. Thank you.